Good evening, members of the House, and welcome to the 4th Ordinary Meeting of the 175th Session of the Literary and Scientific Society. Or should I say, welcome to the Dead End Poets Society. I knew it was either going to be funny or cringy. Because tonight's debate is, this House believes that poetry is ultimately pointless. Before we get into the order of business, we will move on to council announcements, and our events officer isn't here. So next week, Tuesday the 17th, we have our Storm Elixir from 2 to 6. The motion is, this House believes that the UK is ready for a Labour government. The sign-up form is in our Instagram bio, and we need 2 prop speakers. So if you're interested in speaking, contact me, Grant Warren, or the Instagram, please. Do we have any other council announcements, please? Rory?
Well, I'm the internal convener. My name is Rory. We have a position for, I think, in 2 weeks' time, the debate on genderless society. We have a position on prop. If anyone would be interested in that, please message me on Instagram page or come up to me at the social afterwards and tell me. I would like to speak.
I'm guessing that's all the council announcements. So I'd like, in a minute, welcome James Orchin up to give the minutes.
Yeah. Hello, boys and girls.
Hello.
Hi, James. On the 5th of October 2023, the Queen's University Belfast Literary and Scientific Society convened for the 3rd Ordinary Meeting of the 175th Session. For the motion, this House believes religion is a force for good. We know it's off to a spicy start there. As usual, the meeting began with announcements. Each of the council members introduced themselves, and Madam President announced some events that I wasn't listening to. Following a reading of the minutes, the meeting moved to private members' business. Dermot Hamill, HLM, asked the House if the House had a USB charger. Yes, but it was in use at the time. Fintan Lawler, HLM, brought up the spat between India and Canada. Responses were heard from Noah Barnley and Dermot Hamill, HLM. Caitlin Ward raised the issue of the government's reforms of A-levels. Responses were heard from Sam Hazlett, Ciara Swale, Chloe Jacobs, Jenny Steele, Luke Anthony Patrick Maguire, Noah Barnley, who swore.
I did not.
Yes, you did. Dermot Hamill, HLM. Misha Jarrett announced the formation of the Disabled Students Association and urged anyone involved to get involved. Roshan Keenan also raised some other society. Sam Hazlett railed against the raised smoking age. Responses were heard from Eva McBride, Noah Barnley, and surprisingly Jacqueline Bonner, Ciara Swale, HLM, Roshan Keenan. Max Kieran, unfortunately, spoke and raised the removal of Kevin McCarthy's US Speaker, How Time Flies. Responses were heard from Jacqueline Bonner and Noah Barnley. The President's questions, unfortunately, took place. Fintan Lawler, HLM, asked the President of its refusal to condemn Canada. Madam President said it was, quote, the good America. Dermot Hamill, HLM, raised President Trump, and that's his words, not mine, his question if he would rather be electrocuted or get eaten by sharks. The President chose to be eaten by a shark. Not sure why you'd do that, but okay. Daniel Toft raised the President's man voice, quote, I regret my life, and then performed I Dreamed a Dream, sadly without the death at the end. Anyway, Nora Naranja raised the question of an entrance song. She said Meatloaf, played by our great Tom Burns, Esquire. The question was asked. I'm not going to tell you what the question was, but it was asked. The President responded with, quote, a fire, ... and on top of it, there was a spit, which had a cow. At the President's questions, a vote in prior opinion was held. There were 16 votes for aye, 32 votes for nay, sadly, and 12 abstentions, so the opposition have it. First, the proposition was Misha Jarrett. It was argued that the position from the perspective of Judaism, and argued in terms of morality, life, and basic human values, values such as charity, promotion of sanctity of life, and social justice are central tenets of that religion. Religion plays a significant role in fostering community, society, and belonging and support of society. Next, sadly, on the first in the opposition was Noah Barnley, who swore.
Fake news.
Shut up. Noah began by proposing to sell his brother into slavery. He began by discussing materialism and argued that religious groups are inherently anti-consumerist and anti-materialist. He then used the example of the Anabaptist peasant uprising, which was not a good idea, and that Martin Luther argued this was a form of blasphemy. It was. I mean, obviously you're a Mormon, but... And he argued that religious bodies are also hyper-capitalist, despite having argued that they are anti-consumerist several moments prior, and used the example of American televangelism. He then cited Saudi Arabia and the lack of egalitarianism in that country, and he argued that, and I've written it down here, quote, slavery was supported by slavery. I don't know what I meant by that, but that goes without saying. And then he said something about conspiracy theories. Second on the proposition was His Grace Fintan K. Lawlor, HLM, Bishop of Kildare. He asked me to say that. Produced his clerical collar, which then immediately fell off. He then began by rebutting some of Noel Barnley's points by noting that the uprising that Noel mentioned didn't end so well. But again, was anything you've ever supported end well. He argued it's hard to define religious and secular items, and then proceeded to define both of them. He argued that religion has played an important humanitarian and social role, and it's provided a major social framework, and noted that the church provides a great social purpose for people, and then he just kept going on and on and on and on, and he wouldn't stop. At this point, I went to the toilet. Second on the opposition was Ellen Griffiths. I didn't hear any of her speech, really. All I heard was that she might have claimed that homophobia was invented by the Catholic Church in 1870. Interesting. Third on the proposition was Dermot Hamill, regrettably, HLM. He began by railing against popery, his words not mine, and promoted Paisleyite old Calvinism. He argued that the proposition ignored atheistic and secular societies that promoted homophobia and bigotry. Quote, the Free Presbyterian Church is infallible, end quote. He then lifted his hand up and said, God-given Christianity as opposed to what? I don't know. He then decried his parents for their, quote, popish superstitions. Then he attacked Anglicanism, but then said Presbyterian and Judaism are also good, so there's three religions he likes. Third on the opposition was Matt Walker. He demanded to know where Dermot was when Unionists needed him. He argued that religion is used to keep the poor in place. Religion has caused multiple wars. The Magna Carta caused democracy. Oh, no, it wasn't. Apparently, 8 million people died as a result of disease or battle in the 30 Years' War. Religion has held women's rights back, and he used the example of Eve. But then he mentioned the Crusades, and he argued that religion has been used to push science back. I lost track there. Final speaker for the proposition was Sam Hazlett. Quote, Sam Hazlett began by stating that he did not want to associate with the beliefs of Dermot Hamill. Noel Barnley was quoted, and his opposition to murder was noted. Kira Swale was told to shut up. There was much applause. Murder is not wrong, according to Sam Hazlett. People who eat tuna sandwiches deserve death. They should all be killed. Quote, yes. C.S. Lewis was quoted, and his arguments that religion kept people in line was used. Sam was increasingly irritated by questions. Sam argued that because Jonathan is from Dundonald, quote, it is beyond God's creation, end quote. Quote, if I use a plate of tripe to justify killing someone, does it make it evil, end quote. Asked Mr. Hazlett. Sam argued that religion, something the grounding in morality. Sam then decided to discuss the issue of homosexuality and said it's not strictly a religious issue. Quote, I am disgusted by milk. You have no moral centre, end quote. Okay. Yep. The Salvation Army have nice sausage rolls. For those of you who've been in society for several years, that joke will have a completely different context to the rest of you. Quote, women have nice hats in the Free Presbyterian Church. Finally, Sam argued the opposition are stupid. Thus ended the lesson. The final speaker from the opposition was Jonathan Duranja. He began by talking about genocide. And the proposition's arguments had no moral framework. Exclusivist, burden of truth. Then there was a POI, and the president wrote this because it's not in basic and normal English. Elaborated late, full stop, scientific and logical, full stop, quote, how well, quote, facilities, certain ends. Define religion, I think, not specific though. Force for good overall, not dismissed impacts bad. Islam persecutes polytheism, question mark. Questions were heard from Chloe Jacobs, Luke Anthony, Patrick McGuire, and that ginger girl. Following the debate and questions from the House, the vote and speakerability took place. There were 35 votes for the proposition, 14 votes for the opposition, and 11 people weren't listening. Thus, the proposition had it. Can I take the minutes as read?
Aye.
People here tonight.
Now we move on to private members' business, where you can discuss anything that you saw in the news this week or you're just interested in and put it to the House. So do we have anyone for private members' business? I'll go to Sam first.
Yes, I think we've all seen in the news the last week the situation in Israel. I thought it was sensible that someone other than some people brought it up. So I think we should be careful with this issue, but of course it's still something that should be talked about.
Yeah,
Any thoughts?
just as long as everyone remembers to be respectful. I'll only take a couple points on it, but does anyone have anyone to say on it? Hamas. We'll go to Keir first.
On the point of being respectful on this, I think that far too often in these very complicated situations, we see people try to pick sides, try to boil it down to good guys versus bad guys. You see people try to say that one side is completely infallible and the other side, like, our enemy. And I think that people need to really stop trying to boil down any of these really, really complex issues to this, because all it just does is it justifies incredibly heinous acts that can be committed by both sides and can whitewash certain things while giving blind spots to others.
Anyone else? I'll go to Tom.
Yeah, I think coming off that, I'm not, I've tried to spend as little time as I can since whatever Friday or Saturday on Twitter, because none of it's been remotely beneficial. I don't think at any point there's been an awful lot of people throwing opinions without any kind of grounding in any understanding of what is a very, very complex issue, trying to simplify it into something that it isn't. I think an awful lot of this kind of, I think it's kind of hidden an awful lot of the immense and tremendous human suffering from everywhere across that region that hasn't been appreciated, has been failed to be picked up on account of what's become a very, very messy political debate outside of there, and a very, very violent situation in the region. And I think, just to come off all of that, I think it has been oversimplified in a lot of spheres, and the complexity of it has to be, I think, kept in regard at all.
Anyone else on it? Megan?
I just wanted to add on to that, especially with Twitter and the rest of the internet being stupid. If you don't know enough about any sort of topic, especially one of this gravity, just shut up. Like, people just, for some reason, have decided that they must have an opinion on everything and express it to everyone that they know. If you don't know enough about the situation, just don't say anything, please. Thank you.
I have heard what Noah has to say, and it's not bad, so as long as you say exactly what you said earlier.
Please.
I think the Palestinians have a right to be heard, although I don't think that necessarily justifies Hamas going and blowing a lot of things up. I also think, like everyone else has said, it's a very complex and messy issue, and you should probably look at it before you go, oh, I like this side, I like that side. But no, it's really, really bad. But I think bombs are bad. I don't know what everyone else thinks about that. Bombs are not good.
I think the land with bombs are bad. Is there any other pieces of private members? Do you have something to say?
I don't want to say much, just that I think we need to remember that it is a privilege to be able to kind of spectate this from a distance and feel kind of removed enough from it to analyse it and have an opinion on it. Some of us, pieces, like myself, this is our friends and our families at the moment.
Do we have any other pieces of private members' business?
Yes, I've got relatives at the moment who's been called in a draft in Israel, that kind of stuff, so it's kind of distant ones, but still. I would say that it's just it's such a messed up situation right now for everyone in the country, and even more so now the Red Cross is saying that Gaza has been running 48 hours without any food shipments or any electricity, to the point where it's now, they're running out of time basically, let alone the 150,000 troops on the border ready to move in. it's on the precipice of potential genocide to some degree, and it's just completely horrific. You know.
Yep. Any new pieces of private members' business? Kieran?
This is just sort of building on top of this, what we just previously discussed. We brought up Twitter, for example, and I think that was great. You sort of see nowadays, you find political extremism very common now. You find that a lot of people are expressing very radical ideas and are willing to just say things on things that they have no idea what they're talking about. Does anybody have any ideas on why this is why this is a recent phenomenon, or anything you could do to like reduce it?
Anyone on this? Yeah, it's all about political extremism. No?
I think it comes down to the fact that people were hugged enough as kids.
I was beaten enough. That's actually not
Anyone else? Tom?
I think there's a kind of weird corollary to that. Was it yesterday or this morning? There was an SNP MP decided to defect from the party because of toxic culture, and then in a movement I don't understand, decided to join the Tories. They're facing political extinction very nearly, and you would imagine diametrically opposed on pretty much every issue to where she was before. And I think that idea of sort of bizarre political posturing kind of plays into that as well. I don't know what anyone thinks about that. I don't understand it in any way, shape or form. And if anyone can enlighten me in any of it, I would appreciate it.
I'll go to Max.
I generally feel that this is sort of deeply rooted in populism and the seeking of short-term political gains just by political parties. So in order to be seen as dealing with immigration, we're going to have this really radical stance against immigration. We're going to build a barge and then we're going to send it over to this random English village. And then we're going to accidentally contract salmonella in the boat so we can't use it. So we're going to fly into Rwanda, but then we're not going to fly them to Rwanda. And it's like, there's a lot of grandiose sort of political statements used by populist parties, both on the left and the right, to try to be seen as being active and doing proper stuff. And as a result, you see them periodically moving closer and closer to the extremes of either side of the spectrum, just to be seen as pursuing a political goal.
Daniel?
I think specifically on Lisa Cameron defecting to any party personally, like from a personal standpoint, when the news came, it didn't surprise me because she seems to be one of the better SNP MPs. But regardless of kind of politics and regardless of the party that she's now in, she's brought forward some serious allegations of bullying, which are not uncommon for the SNP Westminster group. And the SNP have basically brushed it off and made out that she's the bad one today. Humza Yousaf has said that, you know, it comes as no surprise and it's just trying to brush it away. But I think there is a real issue within Westminster, within the whole estate, but also within the SNP Westminster group, of that kind of culture of bullying that we've seen play out in the last 3 or 4 years.
James?
Context, I suppose. I mean, obviously, the reason I think she's catched the Conservatives is that obviously the SNP leans to the left. There's still quite a sizable contingent within the party that are quite conservative, and not just simply fiscally conservative, as we saw at the leadership election last year, where Kate Forbes nearly won. You know, there's quite a sizable socially conservative wing, especially in the Highlands, in the SNP. So I know Rosie Cameron represents some of the central belt. I suspect there's still quite a sizable Catholic population, so I guess that might explain it, but obviously she's not going to win re-election in near Glasgow.
I'll go to Owen.
So I think it's important to note, if we're going to talk about bullying within Westminster, that the SNP does send over a relatively small contingent of people. Any issue that arises is going to look there, because, you know, political parties like the SNP, like the Dems, tend to be treated on equal footing. They're fundamentally not. Issues of bullying within Westminster have been going back, 30 years as a major issue in the institution, and there's nothing being done to sort out because Westminster is fundamentally incredibly flawed in its current layout.
I'll go to Megan, then Keir, and then we'll take a new piece of private members' business.
Just back to the original point of extremism, especially on Twitter. Attention seekers?
Yeah.
Seriously, like, people will say anything nowadays for just a snuff of attention, and I think realistically, like people, it really boils down to the fact that we've been given this entire social media platform and everybody's like, oh, I'm a special snowflake, I want to say this, and everyone loved me, and then they all clapped. And it's not the case. And so you get all these people saying all this stuff, and then you have other people listening to that. It becomes this massive echo chamber, as we all know, which just breeds more of it. My overall point is Twitter is a hive of scum and villainy, and I think we should just get rid of it.
Here, do you want to end this? Though?
Yeah, you brought up the SNP member leaving and moving to the Tories. I think that sort of speaks to a broader issue also with Twitter as well, where you find a lot of the time that people will be an issue, and then whatever side that issue lies on, they will then adopt the beliefs of all of that side until that one issue is sort of like not really a thing for them. Like you see people who say are specifically right-wing because they might be very economically conservative, and then you'll find that they'll then try to adapt to being right-wing and then try to adopt at least cultural right-wing viewpoints, or you might see the opposite on the left-wing where people might be culturally left-wing and then feel that because of that they have to adopt very, very left-wing viewpoints economically. Like a lot of the time I feel like people will be single issue on things and then use that and then try to fit into a broader group on those one issues that are the only things that they actually care about.
And do we have a new piece of private members' business? Just one. Max?
Believe it or not, despite everything going on in the world, in much lighter news, Keir Starmer got covered in glitter. Possibly the single most exciting thing he's ever done. And so, yeah, that marks the end of the Labour Party conference and was surprisingly well in line with Keir Starmer, completely dull. And I'm just wondering if anyone else has any thoughts on it, or whether it was good or bad or whatever.
The glitter attack, I guess. Keir.
Keir Starmer, whenever he speaks, I feel like a black hole is coming out of his mouth and he is sucking my soul out, and I feel that my life gets shorter the more and more that he talks. And I'm glad that this glitter happened because it gave something sparkly and special to his... Thank you, everyone.
Whilst we all like to sit here and find it incredibly funny that Keir Starmer had to then continue his speech covered in glitter, and I'm no less kind of sympathetic to having the man, you know, just something like that happening. But I think that on a more serious point, there are serious questions to be asked about the security of politicians and how the man was allowed to get that close to Keir Starmer. It's a bit like a few years ago, the whole Theresa May P45 thing. Hilarious, absolutely hilarious. But also, how was he allowed to get that close to the Prime Minister, and how was this other guy allowed to get that close to Keir Starmer? It's the fact that he held on to Keir Starmer for between 5 and 10 seconds before security came running over, and there's serious questions to be asked about the security of politicians.
Anyone on this? Yeah?
A far more serious point. I thought we went really good.
Noah?
I was listening to a podcast 2 weeks ago, and Rory Stewart, I thought, quite aptly categorised how the Labour Party is running at the moment, and that Keir Starmer's running a really, really tight operation, with maybe 3 or 4 other people having input. I think he's so desperate to just kind of play it safe to the point where we're all like, yeah, he's so incredibly boring. But I think that incredibly boring attitude is going to capture some more people among the centre crowd, and let's be honest, he doesn't need to do anything other than be anti-Tory to win the next election.
Anyone else on the glitter? Megan, okay, last point and then we'll move on.
I think he should get glitter suits made because it very much suits him, and it gives us something to look at instead of something to listen to.
And now we move on to President's questions, where you have 5 minutes to ask me anything you want. Okay. I'll go to Max first.
Following on from the previous statement there, will the President be wearing a glitter-based suit for any debates in the future?
All of them. Every single one. Oh no. Keir.
What did you have for lunch?
I had lobster.
I was prepared.
What?
Spike?
Just lobster? Just lobster?
Did you have garlic butter?
No. Any other questions? Noah?
If a protester was to come up and like throw paint at you or something at you, what would be your preferred thing to be thrown at you if you were giving a speech?
Money? Unless it was like golden doubloons because they would hurt. Daniel?
Just to follow from Max's point there, as the Society's Treasurer, I'm very convinced that we have a compelling case to give to the SU for the purchase of glitter suits for all, the President and Secretary at least. And just my second point, Keir's question, I am very much in favour of freshers bringing something new to society, but I'm a big fan of tradition, so what did the President have for breakfast?
I know that line is a swear word.
I didn't plan for this. Oh no.
Another lobster.
I had lamb. Any other questions? Zach?
Though it is the topic of this debate, it's not strictly a political point, so I don't believe we have to be neutral. What is your opinion on poetry? Just in English?
I didn't take any poetry modules. Not to say that I don't like it, I just don't like writing it. That's what I'd have to do. So, yeah.
Quote English student, I don't like writing.
No, we just write silly screenplays about chimney sweeps, it's fine. And I'll take one more question, if anyone has one. If not, I can...
Ask something, anything.
Don't say that.
Tom?
Can we see your chimney sweep screenplay?
Yes, it's not here. I don't have it with me, but please don't talk about it. But yeah, he directed it. It was a radio play.
Yes.
So it is all recorded, so you can listen to it. Anyway, we now move on to our vote of prior opinion. So if you side with the proposition and you do believe that poetry is pointless, please raise your hand now. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, wait, 7. Just 7. Yeah. And if you side with the opposition and you don't think that poetry is pointless, please raise your hand now.
Ronnie, which side do you want, Ronnie? Which side do you want? Yeah, both. Yeah.
33.
I'm staying in his house.
I got 33. 33.
I'm swamped in his house.
And if you don't have any opinions and you'd like to abstain, please raise your hand now. 1, 2, 3. I think those two back there already voted, but I'm not sure. Okay. We can just pretend. And can I have the vote of prior opinion read out, please?
No. Okay, on the motion that is the most boring thing in the world, there were 7 votes for aye, 30 votes, 4 votes for nay, and 1 person decided to alliance. So, again, sort of a bit like Foyle at the last election, by a large margin, it is nay.
Brilliant. And now, before we get into the speeches, I'd just like to read the rules for you. So each speech is 7 minutes long. First and last minute protected time, which will be signalled by the bell right down there, meaning that you can only POI people in the middle 5 minutes. To POI, raise your hand and say point of information on that point or POI. Please keep your POI to 10 seconds and no barracking, meaning wait at least 15 seconds after giving a POI to give another one. Also, very importantly, no back and forth. Lastly, no swearing, as it is in the Constitution that if you swear, you will be fined a bottle of port, which will be presented at the next ordinary meeting. And with that, I would like to welcome Ronnie Lynch to open the proposition.
Let's go, Ronnie.
Thank you. Right.
Talking shit.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
and thank you for joining me tonight. I will preface all my arguments by declaring that I am in fact an idiot. I am also a charlatan and a drunkard, some would say. So please take everything I say with a grain of salt as we embark on this journey of mirth and contemplation. I don't know. Just ignore it. Just ignore everything I say. Right? Tonight I've been assigned the unenviable task of questioning a revered belief that has been deeply etched into the annals of human culture. For too long we've been led to believe, some might even say brainwashed, by the pretentious bourgeois demigods of art and culture that who extol poetry as the highest form of human expression. Today I will stand before you and argue that poetry is not just ultimately redundant, its interpretive quality leads it to false and dangerous narratives and a destruction of its original meaning. The themes of my argument will be that of misrepresentation, unreliability, and poetry's interpretive quagmire in the annals of history. The heart of my first argument lies in the often bewildering and impenetrable nature of poetry. Attempting to decipher the intentions of a poet is ultimately futile, a noble endeavour that ends in an unsolvable puzzle. Poetry is a riddle wrapped in a metaphor, wrapped in symbolism, wrapped in perplexity, where prose can offer all these elements, but offers a much more reliable and accessible representation of views, where there is enough substance to reliably understand the meanings and messages of the author.
On that point?
No.
One running.
Poetry subjects itself to unreliable and biased narratives of human thought more than any other art form because it lacks substance and its inaccessible nature.
On that point.
Go for it.
Okay, so explain exactly how it does that. How is it more inaccessible? How does it rely more on convolution than, say, a fizzle?
Well, if you shut up and let me continue. I am very drunk, I'm not going to lie. Take, for instance, a poet by the name of Friedrich Hölderlin. Friedrich Hölderlin was a German romantic poet whose works often devolved into themes of nature, mythology, and the sublime. Hölderlin's poetry contained themes that can be seen as aligning with romantic ideals of German nature and heritage. However, the Nazis oversimplified these themes and used Hölderlin's verses to promote their nationalist and Aryan supremacy narrative. No, thank you. The Nazis, with all their misguided fervour, managed to twist and mangle his beautiful words to fit their sinister agenda. Such misinterpretations underscore poetry's susceptibility to be moulded and contorted, rendering it... I've used way too many big words here for one else. Capricious and unreliable art form. This was done with all manners of art, but none so more than poetry. For when Hölderlin once beautifully stated, "What remains for friends who have departed, a secret striving for enclosed spheres, nature in the heart like the core of the fruit," the Nazis took that beautiful quote and bastardized it. For Hölderlin's message was that of exploration of the indomitable human condition and commentary on one's innate connection to nature and serenity and beauty. It also draws on the love and connection of the brotherhood of man. How the hell did the Nazis then take this and interpret it to distill ideas of Aryan superiority and nationalistic propaganda? This illustrates poetry's vulnerability to be misused and transformed into a meaningless tool. It becomes not only meaningless, but dangerous, and the narrative of poetry is great because of its interpretive quality, is unconvincing and ultimately lethargic.
On that point?
Go for it.
But what about in post-war Germany with poetry and how it was used to reconcile after the war?
Which, World War I or II?
World War II. Especially in the 1990s, poetry in Germany was used to reconcile with their horrendous past.
Well, I will say on that point that narrative of Germany reconciled very much after the war. They didn't for a long time. Up till I think it was the 1960s, there was a politician who was a former Nazi. His opponents thought it would be a good idea to expose him for being a Nazi. Once they did that, he went from being on the bottom of the tier of people that would get in, to he shot right up to the top and won the election. So ultimately, that what you're saying there about that poetry and how it helped resolve those narratives, didn't really. It was through much more complex and deeper means later on in history that did that. So, But yeah, now let's journey into the annals of history then, where poetry has often played the role of a charming but treacherous figure. Consider the conquest of Alexander the Great, who was so smitten with the interpretations of Homer's epic poems that he embarked on a sphere of conquest and destruction across Egypt, Persia, and India. Millions perished, all because Alexander interpreted poetry as a call to arms and saw himself in the light of the ancestry of Achilles and Heracles. No, thank you. Had the young man been raised in the values of empathy, respect, nuance, and intelligence instead of the emotive and destructive interpretations of poetry that Homer presented, maybe there would not have been 300 years of warfare, death, and torture throughout the Diadochi and Epigoni.
On that point?
No, thank you. All because I know you know your stuff. All of this because one man deemed it his right to conquer the known world, to chase the illusions made by one poet. Let's take Plato.
On that point.
No, thank you. Plato, a man renowned for his wisdom, warned us against this and the dangers of poetry. He said, "For a young person, learning to play the lyre is respectable, a decent accomplishment, good for manliness and soul. But any poetry that is dainty in the same measure, complex and serious, or with rhyming meters, in my opinion, destroys what is manly in him. Moreover, a man's faith and reverence for the gods he takes for granted is completely dissipated when he deems unworthy the gods, the things that are divine, things which are serious and irreverent, and only to be made light of. Now, I might be a drunken fool who loses elections, don't listen to me. But when it comes to the most prolific thinkers of human history, a man renowned not only for his intellectual capabilities, but also for his rugged, broad, and sexy character, where he won multiple Olympic gold medals, I think it is fair to consider his opinion when he said that poetry corrupts the youth, erodes moral values, and dissipates one's reverence to the gods." I really thought there would be an on that point there.
On that point, actually. On that point, check your time.
Are we out of time?
Check your time.
All right. Okay, let me. I'll get to the end of that. As we round to the realm of philosophy, it's time to consider the nihilistic view of poetry. Friedrich Nietzsche, a man of profound intellect, critiqued traditional values and questioned prevailing morality. He would likely find poetry's malleability disheartening. Even Aristotle, with his call for art to reflect reality, would frown upon poetry's tendency to lead us astray from the real world. That is not to say that interpretation and meaning are entirely the works of the devil brought upon us to lead us astray, but they need to be limited and mediated. Am I out? I really didn't write. Okay. Alright, I have a poem at the end. Right.
Everyone stop listening. Poetry,
I hate you. Sometimes the curtains are just blue. None of what you say is true. I can't think of another rhyme, so here's something I'd rather do. Gets lost on cheap carling at the SU. Thank you.
Madam President, members of the House, picture of Richard Nixon. I stand here tonight really desperately fighting the urge to kind of speak entirely in verse as part of some massive, unwanted bit, to oppose the motion that poetry is ultimately pointless. Poetry can sometimes be inaccessible, lofty, and confusing, and my God, can it be bad. While I strongly disagree with the idea that poetry can be pointless, if the motion was "This House believes that poetry written by confused, angry, lonely 15-year-olds is one of the greatest attacks in English language known to man," I'd be sitting on that side of the table. And I say this as one of those angry, confused, and lonely 15-year-olds at one time. But thankfully, that's not what the motion is. Even whenever poetry is bad, it isn't pointless. Even those winding verses I committed when I was younger that were dense with what I thought was really edgy commentary on religion and biting satire, even that had a point. Being able to put pen to paper and write something, to create an entirely new entity, itself alive with ideas and perspectives, was worthwhile. They will never, ever see the light of day, I will make sure of that. If that's not their point, poetry is maligned because it's one of the few art forms in the modern day that isn't built almost exclusively for any kind of public consumption. Before the days of mass media, social media, and really easily accessible porn online, there was a time when adoring fans of people like Byron, Shelley, Keats, Blake would wait in anticipation for the publication of a pamphlet containing their fix. It could be about, I don't know, unrequited love, or the relationship between man and God, or nature, or something kind of horny. Or in the case of a Keats poem I had to do in school, a woman whose brother murders her lover, so then she exhumes the body, cuts its head off, buries it in the plant pot, and then carries it around with her until she dies. We said, well, that's his dead. Those days, thankfully, are over now. Poetry has a smaller captive audience, I'll admit, and has become a more personal and personalised art form, written, just like my teenage laments, for personal purposes rather than any economic value or any kind of public clout, because Christ knows I wasn't getting that. But again, this doesn't make poetry pointless. If anything, oddly enough, its lack of market value makes it in a lot of ways more valuable. Poetry remains untouched by trends or public desires, untarnished by corporate editors trying to suck all the life out of the work in an attempt to make it more palatable to the wider public or to any kind of networks or publishers. Poetry is not beholden to this. It's like that band your really sort of like insufferable indie friend discovered one time that no one really appreciates, but I swear they're going to be the next big thing. Poetry is like that. It's not pointless, it's misunderstood and unknown. But I'll admit, Ron had a point. Poetry can be inaccessible. In fact, a lot of points. That poem was really good. Quite often, people can pick up a poem, read the poem, and feel actively less intelligent than they did before they read the poem. The layers of extended metaphors, ancient imagery, and incomprehensible references can make some poems really difficult to decipher. The sort of accusation of why say it in 30 words when you can say it in 3 is often levelled at poets and their defenders. But I would argue that this kind of idea is anathema to debaters like us, and I will heavily judge anyone who tries to use it in defence of their 7-minute public presentation this evening.
On that point?
Sure.
So why would you say poetry would be useful as opposed to prose, where you can have the accessibility to fully expand your points and your arguments, make them clear, and for anyone who isn't yourself to understand?
I think you can. I think I'll go on and say this later on, kind of a bit more detail, but two things can be not pointless at the one time. Poetry and prose can both be useful, just in different ways, to come to the same conclusion. But the complexity of poems can kind of be their beauty. The layers of understanding below the surface, the work to be done to get to the bottom of it, all the kind of the history and the politics and the religion and the anthropology within the stanzas are almost as important as the words themselves. Now, this isn't to say that all poems are like this. There are some more simple poems that are every bit as important as the more complex ones. T.S. Eliot himself said that genuine poetry can communicate before it is understood. The layers of emotion work together to create an art form which provides us with more than we had before. Now, there are ways to make poetry more accessible. Rory McSparn would say just make the words bigger. But there are other ways as well. You can read more of it, practice. You know, it's a skill to be able to digest poetry in some kind of way. The more you do it, the better you'll become at it. And the amount of content you have to work with is pretty much endless, because every time you read a poem you've read before, you can find something new that you didn't have the first time you read it. You can find a new perspective that you didn't have. It's almost endless, the amount of stuff you can do with it. And this is what the point of poetry is. It offers something to humanity. It can offer a new outlook. It can offer a sense of identity. Now, Adam's going to talk about this later on in terms of Irish culture, I hope. But it's on a smaller personal parochial level that I want to talk about right now. In terms of the personal, there are a huge number of feminist and queer poets, it's not just a bourgeois thing, whose work challenges the world that they are in and enlightens and empowers both the readers and the writers. Not to dwell on them, but my hormone-fueled teenage poems helped me come to terms with aspects of my own identity and my own sense of self. I know people who've been saved by poetry that they feel speaks to them, makes them feel like they belong to something. Now, for a lot of people, their only experience of poetry outside of learning them in school is at weddings and funerals, and there is a reason for this. The power of poetry is that it can express the almost inexpressible in a way that other forms of communication, sometimes like prose, cannot. The extremes of love and grief condensed into verse, they help us understand ourselves and our emotions better. Seamus Heaney is one of, if not the greatest English language poet, and a past pupil of my own school, go figure. He opened up the small rural village of Balahi to the world within his work, expressing the individual and the local in a way which felt, to a lot of people, universal. His use of colloquial South Derry language, much like the work of Patrick Kavanagh who came before him, became heard the world over, but never diluted the strong sense of being from that place that Heaney's work had. And despite living and working here in Belfast, in Dublin, in Oxford and Harvard, and being known internationally, roughly half of his work is centred around the people and places within a 3-mile radius of Mossbawn where he grew up. Heaney's identity is interlinked and completely inseparable from his works, and both, I think, are made stronger for it. So, my friends, don't look upon poetry as some kind of useless, pointless exercise in navel-gazing and self-pity, although some of it can be. Don't look at it as an elitist academic pursuit only for those who spend their days sitting in coffee shops dressed like me, chain-smoking and thinking about philosophy. Poetry offers an invaluable insight into the human psyche, into who and what we are, and to who and what we can be. My friends, I urge you to vote for the opposition tonight.
Thank you, Tom, for an excellent speech, and I'd like to welcome Aoife Conlon as second proposition.
So I'd like to begin by asking the House to consider who they believe is the best contemporary creative mind. Some of you may think about Taylor Swift, who has become something of a cultural juggernaut in the past few years, or perhaps the director Wes Anderson and the distinct visual aesthetic he has created within his films. I very much doubt that anyone in this room thought of a contemporary poet. Why would you? Poetry is nothing but an archaic form of writing that has lost all relevancy in our modern world. It's convoluted, inaccessible, and probably the most pretentious way of expressing a feeling or an opinion. It is rendered completely pointless by other forms of creative expression that can do everything that poetry can, whilst also actually being enjoyable. The opposition might sway you to look towards the inarguably rich history of poetry. Generations of literary greatness can be defined by the poets of the time. Shakespeare of the Renaissance, Wordsworth of the Romantics, and T.S. Eliot of the Modernist period. I, however, entreat you to think about today. Who is at the forefront of our generation? What is paving the way for creative expression today? No, thank you. To put it plainly, it's music. Singers, songwriters, and producers are now the foundation of modern pop culture. Music is in our environment constantly.
On that point?
From whatever is streaming on our Spotify playlist to the targeted choice of songs in advertising, it is inescapable, and undeniably, poetry has lost its legacy to it.
On that point?
No, thank you. This is unsurprising when you compare the modern consumption of music to the general population's experience of poetry.
On that point?
No, thank you. In a study by the National Library of Medicine, it was found that music is incredibly effective in regulating the emotions of listeners. This is a reason. No, thank you. This is a reason why we cry after listening to a sad song on a bad day. This is a reason why we feel so cathartic when the Grease Megamix plays in Limelight at 1 a.m. Songs are able to resonate with any possible feeling in anyone. Even if the lyrics are somewhat vague, music is a universal language that is understandable to everybody. No, thank you. Requiring no effort to discover what you are supposed to feel when you listen to it. Poetry, theoretically, is supposed to function in the same way. What is the value of a poem if it doesn't aim to evoke a feeling from the reader? It would be pointless. The difficulty lies in the subjectivity of poetry as well as the confusing, unclear way it is written. In order to get anything from reading a poem, you must analyse it first. Who has the time for that? Who wants to spend their time doing that? And who is to say that the conclusions that you draw from your analysis are the correct conclusions to draw upon? No, thank you. Ultimately, poetry has become a relic of a bygone era of writing that has been overanalyzed into mundanity, failing at its core purpose to connect with human emotion. Ironically, this very same idea is explored by Billy Collins in his poem, Introduction to Poetry. He states, "I want them to water ski across the surface of a poem, waving at the author's name on the shore. But all they want to do is tie the poem to a chair with rope and torture a confession out of it." Here is a poet outright declaring the inaccessibility of poetry within his poem. He's quite literally comparing the action of analysing a poem to the act of torture. Essentially, no thank you, he's saying to understand a poem, we must analyse it, but not too much or we'll butcher the meaning. Therefore, for readers, poetry becomes akin to a fragile, unsolvable puzzle. It is in no way surprising that we as a society have turned to alternative means, no thank you, of creative expression. Outlets that do not demand us to understand them in the correct way, rendering poetry pointless. No thank you. Or maybe I'm being harsh. Maybe the modern poet has something more to offer than I would like you all to believe. In the age of social media, I can be a poet. And more voices have been given a platform than ever before. Surely there must be something worthwhile in the poetry that is written today. So I thought it would be only fair to read out some lovely contemporary poems for you all to enjoy. Thank you, that one guy. Starting off. Yeah. So we're going to start off strong with the popular YouTuber Gabby Hanna. Don't know if anyone's familiar. She is not once, but twice, a published poet. Here's my favourite poem from her first collection, entitled Relative. Time is relative. Beauty is relative. Family is relatives. No, thank you.
It's more for writing students.
The next one is from Rupi Kaur. Don't know if you've ever heard of her. Yeah. She was actually named the Writer of the Decade in 2019 by the New Republic. And, you know, maybe it's really well deserved. I don't know. I don't really read a lot of poetry. So here's one that really struck me. He isn't coming back, whispered my head. He has to, whispered my heart. Aww. That was, sorry, 1 second. Inspiring stuff, I really like it. And I thought, right, let's go back to Instagram, let's see what the regular kids are doing. This is from Pasha the Poet, found it randomly. Paint the canvas of my heart with the colours of your love. Good. Any thoughts? Oh, you like it? Oh, good. So, poetry is past its peak. It's outdated and useless to the modern audience that has so many better alternatives for self-expression. The poetry that is published now is unbearable word vomit that your aunt will repost on Facebook.
On that one?
No.
I'm sorry.
It's pointless. Please vote for the proposition. Thank you for your time.
Does the 7 minutes start when I start speaking, or has it already started? It's already started? Oh, okay, that's grand. I don't have that much to say anyway.
Alright,
look.
I hate you, man.
This entire debate so far, no offense, has been framed by the proposition in what is most politely described as a disingenuous fashion. They've ignored the actual topic of the debate. I'm not quite sure that they know what the topic of the debate is, and there's a reason they've ignored it, and I think you will all agree with this. You can't talk to me because it's in my protected time, but I think you'll all agree with this. They've ignored it because it's fundamentally a really stupid position. It's a really stupid, indefensible position because you don't need to like poetry to think it has a point. You can hate poetry, you can hate poets, you can think they're bad, but all you need to agree to is that poems and poetry at some point has had an impact on someone. Good or bad, and then it has a point, because we're not talking about whether poetry is good or whether or not it's better or worse than music, or whether or not it should exist, or whether or not it's declining in quality. We're talking about does it have a point. And poetry is like any other art. You cannot separate poetry from other art forms. It's like music, it's like a film. And if you're going to argue that poetry is pointless, where do we stop? Are we arguing that all art is pointless? Maybe. But why? We are social beings. There is no
point. The man's stating facts.
Okay.
Thanks. Cool. There is no God. We are social beings. We make the decisions ourselves. We decide what has a point and what doesn't have a point. We decide what is pointless. So maybe we are going to decide that art doesn't have a point. Fair enough. Maybe art doesn't have a point, but why? Because that is boring and stupid and unromantic and terrible. So we might as well agree that art has a point, and if art has a point, so does poetry. Now, if the argument is that poems and poetry is classist or middle class or inaccessible, I mean, we can disprove that with empirical evidence. Carol Ann Duffy, Fran Locke, Martin Hayes, 3 working class poets.
On that point, my companion here made the case of Rupi Kaur and Kathy Hannan, who are very much don't represent that bourgeois elite level thing, but they're the most prolific.
They're the most prolific.
Yes, of our time. That's what they won many awards. They were voted that she was voted
by which magazine?
I don't remember.
There we go. But even okay, fine. Let's say that it is middle class or that it's inaccessible or whatever. This would still not make it pointless. This would just make it annoying, which doesn't make it pointless. That's a different thing. And also, poetry supposedly being middle class. All art is middle class. Art is a middle class thing by nature. It's not really a point though. Poetry is one of the most accessible forms of art. I cannot go and write an album, partly because I can't sing and I have no musical ability, but mainly because I can't afford a guitar or a drum set. But I can afford to write, I don't know, whatever. I can afford to speak a poem because poetry is spoken, it's accessible. Anyone can hear a poem, anyone can write a poem. You don't need cameras, you don't need a crew, you don't need a cast, you don't need some weird chimney sweep radio drama thing, which I've heard parts of and I'd never want to relive that. Poetry is also used in social revolutions. I mean, Bobby Sands wrote poems. Palestine has a rich history of poetry. Poetry is one of the only things you can't take from a revolutionary. You can take that. Go for it.
I'm a Palestinian, I've never heard Palestinian poetry personally. So what do you want to say to that?
Ronnie, that's a skill issue.
I mean, that's an excellent point, and I mean, fair enough. But look, poetry is one of the only things you can't take from people, as I say. You can take a revolutionary's guns, you can take a flag, you can take a pen, you can take anything. You cannot take words from people. I mean, you can cut out their tongues, but I don't think you should do that. But you cannot take words from people. You cannot stop people from speaking poetry, because that is what it is. Poetry is a spoken form. We're talking about poetry as if it's some archaic thing that needs to be written down. The reason all those poems sounded terrible, well, okay, they're terrible poems, but it's because poetry is meant to be spoken. Poetry is meant to be go for it.
I think I spoke beautifully.
You did. You did. That's very fair. But you weren't the poet. And you weren't identifying with the poems. You were understanding the poems on an emotional level, not saying you understood them perfectly well, and they're terrible poems. But to speak a poem into existence, to really get it to exist and to kind of be in front of us, you need to understand it.
On that point,
Go for it.
I think to demonstrate this point best, you better read us some poetry.
Oh, Christ, right. Right, okay. I'm going to read a poem about war by a man called Hedwyn. Don't know if anyone knows who he was. He was fighting in the First World War for the British Army, and he was killed. And a few days before he was killed, he'd written a poem about war in Welsh, and he won the chair of the National Eisteddfod in Wales, which is the highest honour a Welsh person can win. No, I'm not going to go there. It's the highest honour a Welsh person can win. So I'm going to read this poem. So, Gwai fi fwy, mwy mawn, oes mor dreng. Adieu ar drai ar orwell pell. O'i ôl mai dyn, y deryn gwareng, ond codi y drwy'r pell. It's a poem about the pointlessness of war that no one understood. So dictatorships... Yeah, go for it.
What if I can't understand that? I don't speak native languages.
Don't you? English is a made-up language in this country, I have to say that. Look, dictatorships hate poems. They hate poets. Every dictator. So if you hate poems, you're basically a dictator, and you're basically understanding Franco. Franco had poets assassinated. The evil USSR hated poets. they hated Joseph Brodsky. I don't know, I was researching this as I was sitting there. Also, poetry led to rap. Kendrick Lamar, all right, BLM. Kendrick Lamar's the greatest musician of all time. Poetry is a rich part of Ireland's oral tradition, and that oral tradition was brought to its knees by the British Empire. Terrible, terrible things. Poetry is meant to be heard. As I said, it is music, it is emotion, it is a song. You've argued very well, very different points. No one has yet to give me a good reason that poetry is pointless. Poetry has many uses. It elicits emotion. I think it was Shakespeare who said, or maybe it was someone in Hamlet who said, I must unpack my heart with words. Look, you don't need to actually agree with anything I've said. You can hate poetry, you can hate poems, you can hate Gabby Hanna or whoever it was. But if you can recognise that poetry has ever had an impact on you, or poetry has ever had an impact on anyone you know, or poetry has ever done anything, then surely it has a point. Thank you very much.
And we have a second round of applause for a brilliant incident. I'd like to welcome Zach Savage to close the proposition.
So, important context. I study English and creative writing.
Shame.
I know.
That's rough.
Yeah. But I did make the choice this year not to do poetry.
Nice.
To start with, I'd like to just address what Tom was saying earlier. I feel there's a big difference between poetry as an outlet of expression and poetry as an art form of cultural relevance. So yes, poetry can be useful to people in getting down emotions or transferring thoughts to a page, but it's not fundamentally a particularly relevant expression medium to a wide audience, at least in these days. Simply compared to literally any other form of writing, it's just ineffective at communicating ideas. Essays, interviews, and biographies will educate people. Novels, plays, scripts, comics, etc. can do the same while entertaining an audience in tandem.
On that point?
Sure.
Yeah, just because poetry isn't relevant to you does not mean it's not relevant to other people. I think it's very close-minded to think that just because it's not relevant in your social circle that someone else doesn't eat, live, and breathe poetry, and therefore it would have a point.
Well, if someone's eating poetry, I don't think I should do it. Compared to any other art form, poetry cannot communicate a message as effectively as, say, a novel or a play, where you can convey the same messages through metaphors or parallels or character arc, satire, parody. All of these other art forms are more heavily disseminated than poetry today.
On that point?
No, thank you. I remember doing English in school, hopefully, and making notes on poetry. But, assuming you make notes in the first place, but in that instance, the word count of your notes was always more than the poem itself. That's a staggering ratio of points to pointless stuff. It demands an unreasonable, no thank you. It demands an unreasonable amount of critical analysis to actually understand the poem fully, and a lot of your analysis may not even be accurate to the author's intent. As Ronnie said, it can be misinterpreted. Yes?
Author's intent doesn't that important to a poem because it is, for a lot of people, there are a million different interpretations of a poem. There don't have to be. There is not one single interpretation of a poem, so it doesn't matter if it's wrong because it kind of can't be.
Yes, you can make other interpretations of a poem that might be explicitly stated, but there's also a stage where you can take a poem wildly out of context. As an educational tool, it's very poor because it leaves too much to the imagination, and it can't really hone down on specific messages, at least not as clearly as other forms. But it lacks captivation as a medium of entertainment. As Aoife was saying earlier, it's most similar to probably music. But there's really nothing poetry can do that music can't. It's emotional, it's evocative, but so is music.
On that
poetry, no thank you. Poetry can describe emotions, but listening to music can make you feel it. And it's enjoyable generally to the music as well. No, I think Daniel's.
I mean, don't flatter yourself. But I just wonder why you're recognising that it can do all these things. It can do them worse. but there's plenty of things that I can do that are worse than other people. You know what I mean? I'm entirely without use, you know.
Daniel, if I wanted to hire you as a bricklayer, that'd be pointless to me. You might nod along to poetry if you're listening to it, but you'll headbang to the best bops. Poetry can't do that, which is why music is everywhere in society, but poetry is generally a niche passion. No, thank you. It's common to be asked what kind of music you listen to, but people only ask you who your favorite poet is if they know you already like poetry. They don't have to make that assumption with music.
Oh, no point.
No, thank you. Poetry essentially is just lyrics without an instrumental.
Sorry.
No, thank you. You have to make a chore out of reading and analysing poetry, but music will just come to you. I asked this house, in reference to Aoife earlier, whether or not you like her music. Do any of you believe Taylor Swift would be a household name if she was a poet?
On that point, I have something here from a Shakespeare expert in the University of America. It says Taylor Swift is, quote, a real poet and compares her to the bard.
I actually have some notes on Shakespeare here. Do you know how many sonnets Shakespeare wrote? 154. Only 37 plays, but I don't need to tell this house which of his works are more iconic and quotable. His plays and their ideas have become the cornerstone of modern storytelling. Every romantic tragedy is compared to Romeo and Juliet. His histories are the precursor to Game of Thrones, at least the good seasons. But the cultural impact of Sonnet 22, I could not tell you.
On that point.
No, thank you. Unless you're going to quote Sonnet 22. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day from Sonnet 18? The most famous line in all of his sonnets is still frequently believed to be from Romeo and Juliet.
On that point?
No, thank you. I can appreciate great poets, but I feel that there might be a bit more value to the likes of Robert Frost as a country singer, or Philip Larkin as an emo.
On that point.
Lo-fi T.S. Eliot. Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying that all these poets make better singers, but you're not saying that they're pointless or that their work is pointless. You're just still saying you prefer music. So subjectively, you prefer music forms good for you. You're not saying poetry is pointless.
Poetry has its uses, but it's like I was saying in reference to Tom earlier. It has a use in terms of the medium to express ideas in your mind. That's a very useful experience for other writers. And I know people who like to write poetry. That's grand. I've written poems, begrudgingly, but still. But in terms of communicating a story or an idea, other forms of entertainment are generally better. And in that instance, poetry is quite pointless. I believe Tom was saying, I've still got time, but Tom was saying about, was it Seamus Heaney's personal experiences in his poems? That's fantastic. If I wanted to get a depiction of the Troubles from Kieran Carson, I'd have a better job looking at Derry Girls.
On that point?
No, thank As a shared art form, disseminated to a wider audience, poetry will never have the same relevance or impact in our cultural zeitgeist as books, film, or TV. Even the worst poem, even the best poems in history can't match the level of discussion our worst Star Wars films will get.
Why is this debate where everyone's bargaining? I don't get why it's why do you feel passionate about poetry?
Right. Let me talk to you. So, this has been one of the most interesting debates I've been at, because it makes me want to claw out my eyes and jump in the wagon. Not your fault, not your fault, not any of your fault. The motion itself is quite biased, so that, I guess, is my first point. So, all of your arguments are irrelevant, and that's just what I'm going to start off with. I have not written an actual script for my speech today, big first for me, even though it's something that I'm really passionate about. Bit poetic, actually, if you think about it. But it's like trying to explain why we breathe air. You just do, and that's it. If you delve into it any deeper, you really, like, there's not much point to it. So, let's start off with the only valid point that I could think of, which actually was not a valid point for the proposition to make, would be nihilism, which is cringe, and it's not a valid point.
God is dead.
And John Proctor also said God is dead, but at least, you know.
Yeah, well, I don't know what that is, so.
So, poetry is everywhere. How is it pointless if it's everywhere? It means something to someone. It means something to me, personally. I know I'm a big nerd. I don't care. I like poems. I actually really enjoyed sitting for hours on end studying Seamus Heaney and Robert Frost back to back for A-levels. I kind of wanted to die, but you know what? Thinking back on it, I did really enjoy it. So, but because poetry is everywhere, how can it be pointless? Also, just because you don't like it does not mean it's pointless. If that was the case, I'd be getting rid of dubstep and drill, but I know people love that. There's so many people that love drill, and I can't stand it. And that's just me. That's fair enough. There's a lot of people that would hate stuff that I like. For example, poetry. Doesn't mean that it's pointless. Ireland, in fact, has some class poets. For example, Seamus Heaney, Tom Burns, me. I think a lot of us have actually written poetry, and therefore, it had a point to you at the time. Poetry is not pointless.
Point of information?
Yes.
Yeah, the point whenever I wrote my poetry was to get a grade on it.
Good for you. And that was a valid point. So did you get a good grade? Apologies. Well, I hope you got a good grade there. So also, music is poetry with extra sounds. Music is poetry. Music is poetic. It can be poetic. There are people that have turned poetry into music. It is just with an instrument or with whatever those wee keypads are that you can make the noises on. Then you can, I don't know, I think that's DJing or something. But it is poetry. It is poetic. So is films or many other art forms. You can call things poetic, and it is a form of poetry. It's really difficult to describe where the line goes in this argument of what is actually considered poetry. What?
If everything is poetic, if everything is poetry, doesn't that make it redundant? Doesn't that like say everything is matter, you know? Like
everything is matter though. Okay. It's okay. Your speech is over. You don't have to trouble yourself anymore. Yes. Also, just on your speech, a lot of you guys were starting to say, "Oh, poetry is very elitist, and it's bourgeois," and then everybody is also in the same sentence being like, "Oh, but we need to worry about the poor working class people that can't understand anything interesting because they're so stupid and they don't understand things." It's like saying that working class people don't understand Shakespeare. That in itself is so elitist to insinuate that working class people cannot understand anything that is somewhat complex. It's like saying that math is elitist. You wouldn't say that though, because people in their heads associate a lot more meaning to math than poetry. But I don't know, because it is important, like poetry to some people. Yes.
So you brought up that it's elitist of you that I'm trying to understand poetry is hard, but then someone earlier on your side made the argument that it takes a lot of effort to understand poetry.
It does, but it's something that you can learn, and working class people can put in effort to learn things. So, thank you, I know. First thing that came up when I searched, because I just wanted to see what people would say, this is poetry pointless. I put it into Safari or Google or whatever search engine it was some person trying to say that it's because music is somehow better. And this was some of the worst nonsensical arguments that I've heard. Aoife actually did a lot better. I think, did you also look up this article? Because you quoted the exact poem that they quoted, trying to defend poetry, using a poem for a point. To say that poetry is awful. What? What? So So, also, what else do I even have here? I have a lot of this stuff. Books, novels, everyone's like, oh, but you can't use poetry to describe all these things. Sarah Crossan, I met her personally, she's lovely by the way. She wrote this book called One, and it's about conjoined twins and their life. The entire book is written in verse. That's a poem. Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, and for a lot of you that were saying that, the poem is shorter than the notes written on it, my notes on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, I could write an entire academic essay on that, but I'm a drama student, I backed out of English a long time ago. What was my point? Yes, it's difficult to understand, yes, but only if you don't try, and I think that's what it boils down to, is a lot of people are saying, I don't like it, and so it's pointless to me. Well, good for you. Good for you, but it's not pointless to other people. It's really interesting to me. What's her name? She wrote Milk and Honey, the one that you were quoting from. Ruby Kaur. I read that entire book of plays. It was class. I loved it. Incredibly feminist, I loved it, I did. So, what am I boiling this down to? Skill issue. Thank you very much.
Can I get it on the record you don't believe in matter?
You exclude it in the bubble. Anyway, now we move on to questions. So how these works is anyone in the audience can ask a question. First we ask to the proposition, one person can respond, and then someone from the opposition responds. We have questions for the proposition, opposition, and abstaining questions. Make sure your abstaining question is actually abstaining and doesn't side with either side, because that usually happens. Anyway, do we have any questions for the proposition? I'll go to Daniel first.
Are you all okay?
Proposition to respond.
I'm doing pretty good. I'm making all day. We'll go play it. That's okay.
Opposition?
Can you all answer the phone call?
Okay, do we have a question for the opposition? Keir?
So the proposition brought up a couple examples of poems that supported their point that it was pointless, like that terrible Gabby Hanna one. But the only poem that you brought up was the Welsh one that you didn't say in English, so none of us could understand it, which I suppose is a metaphor for poetry in itself. But would you be able to give us any examples of like poems that you think would support your point?
One person
Can read them.
can respond. Megan?
2 seconds. Sorry.
Sing the phone.
Something at the side film music on.
Just read me the flirt.
This is one of my favourite ones that I ever did. Let me see if I can find it.
Think about it. I'll be gone when the morning comes.
When you have nothing more to say, just drive for a day all around the peninsula. The sky is tall as over a runway, the land without marks, so you will not arrive. But pass through, though always skirting landfall, and you're in the dark again. No. It's Peninsula by Seamus Heaney, and it was one of my favourite plays that I studied at A-level. Does that answer your question, or do I need to keep going?
I mean, you could have just said Invictus and I would have agreed with you.
Okay. Proposition to respond to Seamus Heaney's Peninsula. And do we have an abstaining question?
If anybody's seriously asking you to define poetry, you will die.
I'm going to take
I'm saying that the whole time. Define poetry.
Proposition to respond first, please.
Pointless. A degenerative art form.
One person. And opposition to respond.
For the protection of James' own welfare, and then talking about all of ours, probably safer not to.
Go on.
Do we have another question for the proposition? A real question? Okay, what's your state?
My name is Ben Holmes. My question is for the sexy hunk in the blue tuxedo thing. Whatever. You mentioned Plato in your thing, going on about how much he hated poetry and all, and you also derided the Homeric epics as well. It was also Plato who said that the Homeric epics built Greece and the Greek intellectual tradition that formed the basis of Western tradition. That has a point to it. That has a lot of point to it, Ronnie. What would you respond to that?
Opposition to respond.
Plato was a very complex.
No.
Opposition to respond.
That's a good point.
Yes. Yes, you have to respond.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Well done. Let's go. Yeah. Let's go.
And do we have another question for the opposition?
Nah.
Daniel? No?
No, Daniel.
Toft has one?
Yeah. So Tom, you specifically mentioned that you've written poetry before that you would not like to share it with.
No, I wouldn't.
I feel that after hearing your speech, what would really, see, I'm still split on who to vote for here. What would really entice me to vote for your side is if you read a poem and of your own making, and based on how good or shit it is, we can all then determine whether poetry is useless or not.
You're very lucky day that for some reason I decided not to bring the poems I wrote when I was 14 years old to the debate chamber tonight, 8 to 21.
Always next week.
There is always next week. Actually, no, if there is one, I don't flex. I was published as a poet whenever I was about 11. And that might be on the internet somewhere, like very deep crevices. If you can find that, I will stand up and read my 11-year-old poem about me being bullied to the room.
And what did the proposition think of Tom's poetry? And lastly, do we have another abstaining question? Okay, I'll go to James because
a year ago, I read in Society a great poem by Bono about the landscape. Has anyone here heard it before?
No. Opposition to respond to that.
Well, on St. Patrick, he drove out the snakes with his prayers, but that's not all it takes. But a snake symbolizes an evil that rises and hides in your heart. That's it breaks. And the evil has risen, my friends, from the darkness that lives in some men. But in sorrow and fear, that's where saints can appear, to drive out those old snakes once again. And they struggle for us to be free from the cycle in this human family. Ireland's sorrow and pain is now in Ukraine. St. Patrick's name is now Zelensky. What is the social importance of that?
Opposition to respond first. Sled? Okay. Proposition to...
Then we say flop.
And with that, we are going to move on to the vote on speaker ability. Now, this is not your actual opinion, it is who you think spoke best tonight. So if you think that the proposition spoke best tonight, raise your hand now.
Put your hand up. With Ronnie Lynch. With Ronnie Lynch.
11.
Talk to me nice, Ronnie.
I got 11. Okay, and if you think that the opposition spoke best tonight, please use your hand now.
That's close. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Support. That's my present.
I got 32. What? 32. And if you thought they both spoke really well or thought they both did really bad, please raise your hand now to abstain.
1,
2,
3.
4. Yes. And can you please read the vote on speaker ability?
Sadly, yeah, fuck off.
That's my president.
Well, now there's going to be 0 votes for the proposition. 32 votes for the opposition, 4 people were actually listening to the debate. So by a country mile, the opposition has it.
Well done to the opposition. Next week's debate is this House believes the British Empire did more good than harm.